Welcome to another episode of the Moving Spotlight podcast. This is your chance to learn how to take control of your creative career. We discuss the tactics and mindset it takes to elevate your skills and craft in any creative endeavor. If you're listening to us as a podcast, be sure to check us out on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a listen on your next walk by the river. If you have a river near you, we have a brand new Patreon page where you can support us and help us create more great content. We want to thank our newest patron, Paul Melkor. Paul, thank you for supporting the show. Now let's get on with it. My name is John Ruby. This is my main man,
Corbin Quayle. Hey, everyone.
Today, we're excited to have Bryan Holdman on the show. Bryan is a writer and producer on such shows as Pretty Little Liars, Vampire Diaries, and the brand new show, Our Kind of People. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Oh my gosh. We are excited to have you here. We want to jump right in. I am curious now, we're both Northwestern grads, Bryan.
Yeah.
And when did your love of performing, entertaining, writing, when did that spark start?
That's a lifelong journey that I've been on. I actually started out in the theater. And all of my childhood, all the way through college, I was actually a performer, mostly musical theater. And I also loved literature and reading. And so sort of theater and reading and writing. I loved academic writing too. And all these things kind of were separate, distinct things. And when I stumbled upon the radio, TV, film major at Northwestern, and then within that major into the creative writing for the media program, I suddenly began to see ways that all these things linked up. First of all, studying film from a critical standpoint, you're reading the film much like you're reading any piece of great literature. And so that suddenly clicked. And then in my film and TV production classes, I was seeing all these parallels from my experience in the theater and realizing that this was just another place to put those skills all together. And it just kind of clicked at all the things I loved, but like in one place. And I find that to this day, I'm still drawing on things I learned in high school and college theater classes and literature classes as a part of the work that I do in television.
Yeah. Is there was there a specific like show or time or thing where you're like, this is what I love to do, you know, like was it that specific, or was it a little more like just kind of, it was always there?
It was always there. And I was like kind of picking up little pieces and realizing like I have this interesting skill set and this is this thing that I love over here. And boy, this really kind of gets my wheels turning. But it took me the journey to figure out how to pick the pieces up and kind of put them together in the right way, using hand signals to also demonstrate, because I loved Legos, and so it's but yeah, it was a real journey, you know. It was a real journey. It was a real journey.
Yeah.
Did you have like a teacher at some point in your life that like kind of gave you some nugget of truth that you still keep with you in your back pocket whenever you're writing? Or
oh my goodness, yes, actually, because it's one of the most true pieces of advice I ever heard. It was my 8th grade English teacher. And he was critiquing an essay that I had written. It might have been on The Great Gatsby. And it was, he turned this piece of writing back to me with the word KISS written at the top, which is an acronym for Keep It Simple, Stupid.
Yes.
And it just, you know, I can tend to sort of really get grand in the way that I'm trying to convey ideas and thoughts in my writing, especially at 8th grade. Like I was definitely, I was swinging for the bleachers with my academic writing in 8th grade. Let me tell you what, I really was. And I think it's just because I had this love of words and this love of language. And I was really just like, I was not the kid who was like, oh God, a 10-page essay. I was like, 10 pages, that's like so short, you guys. So, you know, I was always, I was diving in and really kind of like looking for loving the opportunity to just all the words,
Yeah.
And this piece of advice, keep it simple, stupid, it just keeps coming back to me. And it is a great kind of little simple thing to have ringing in the back of my head anytime I'm writing, to be able to recognize when and where I'm overwriting,
Yeah.
and to continue to develop my inner editor in a way that is useful, especially in television, where sometimes when you're being asked to rewrite or edit, it's actually got to be quite precise,
Yeah.
in terms of preserving the structure of the episode, but then trying to fix things that are super technical and maybe not even related to story at all. And how do you do that? How do you go in there and fix the thing that needs fixing without wrecking the scene or derailing production, which is a train that is rushing down the tracks, and you've got to kind of just shoo.
Yeah.
and that can be a challenge.
Bryan, one of the things I was thinking about is especially when I'm working with actors and teaching, and sometimes when I'm working with some writing stuff, is this idea that you touched on, which I think is also this idea of like keeping things simple and clear,
Mhm.
but it doesn't make it easy, right? Sometimes we hear simple and it's like, oh, it's easy, or keep it clear. No, it's not easy, but
Mm-mm.
that simple and having that clarity, in writing or in acting is something that like we're constantly kind of, honing and trying to kind of get back to,
Yeah, yeah.
um, there's a great, I love Groucho Marx, and Groucho Marx wrote like a pretty long letter. And he's like, sorry, I didn't have the time to write a shorter letter because it takes time to get the same message across in less words. And I love that, And so I think
Yeah.
with what you're talking about, there is that constant process, it sounds like, with writing, of like how to keep it simple and clear,
Mhm.
but it's not always easy to do. Right.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. The same is absolutely true for acting. I watch a lot of acting,
Yes.
and I find that the actors who are sort of maybe having a more complex um, process, if you will,
Mhm.
uh, that the technical part of the acting tends to show up ahead of the performance. And
Mhm.
the actors who are more dialed into like what is simple and essential about what this character wants in this moment and how they're going to go about getting it,
Yeah.
the technique is not evident, and you're much more sort of like in it with a living, breathing being,
Yeah.
which
I,
is
I
what you
some
want as an actor.
Totally. Sometimes it's like you can see it. I can see a click in an actor, and I call it the zip line, Bryan, which is like the one thing. It's like they just like zip line through the scene with what you're talking about, where it's just like, and that
Mhm.
thing, once they find it, can take them through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, too, from a writer's point of view, because in television you're working a lot with the same actors, and so
Mm,
you're getting a sense of what their skill set is, where they're super strong, where they're, I don't want to say not necessarily weak, but like
yeah.
where they may be bringing certain things to the character and letting other things kind of not be a part of that character's whole
Yeah.
being for
Yeah.
various and sundry reasons. I don't ever want to just be like, and they're weak at comedy.
They're deficient. They cannot do. Don't give this
Yeah,
person a
Do
joke.
better
Don't give this
next
person a
time.
joke.
but in terms of getting to the point where they can zip line,
Yeah.
it is incumbent upon the writer. If the writer
Mm,
has done the work to simplify
yeah.
on the page, then
Yep.
you're actually giving them exactly the right weight and balance to be able to zip with speed through a
Yeah.
scene where it is seamless for them, because they can pick it up off the page and immediately be like, yeah, I exactly see how to do this, you
Yeah.
know. So it
Yes.
is it's a part of that relationship between writer and actor, even though um I think TV, in my experience, interaction with actors sometimes can be limited.
Mm.
Being conscious of that and paying attention to the actors that you're writing for is also a big part of the job.
Yeah, and it's interesting on the acting end with what you're talking about, Bryan. I've seen that actors, when the scene makes sense to them, they learn they memorize the lines a lot quicker. So
Mhm.
sometimes when a scene is confusing, or if the writer's still kind of finding it in a sense, then it's like, man, I'm really struggling with these words, and it's like, well, it hasn't been kind of solidified on how it should. So it's interesting how sometimes like the memorization, or whatever, or just like
Oh
having the
yeah.
words sink in can connect
Oh
with
yeah.
where the scene is landing, right?
Yeah. Oh, I've experienced that in myriad ways over the course of years.
uh, when it comes to writing for these, like, is it easier to write for a pilot, or is it easier to write once you know these characters, like on episode 309? Like what is the? I mean, there are probably pros and cons of both.
No, it's a process. It is a process, because when you're writing the pilot episode, it's not cast yet.
Mhm.
And so anybody who's in the position of writing a pilot is doing the work of creating characters from whole cloth, from air. And a thing that you experience as a writer many, many times over, and it can be a hard lesson to learn, is that moment when it's no longer yours. And you only have a limited amount of time with these characters between you and the keyboard and the page. And then in television, you really have to then realize, okay, that's where my work as the writer, where that private, beautiful, just moment of pure creation ends. The minute it's cast, the actor is bringing an attitude, a lifetime worth of experience, and, myriad different perceptions to the character that you have written. And so now it becomes a conversation about this character. And so it's a different thing to write for a character as you begin to, over time, see it interpreted by the same actor. And I'm talking about, especially being on a series like Pretty Little Liars for 7+ years.
Yeah.
You're really walking through a long span of time and experience with these actors as they are growing the character. And it even if it's not a face-to-face conversation, through the page, you're still having conversations with that actor. And you're watching them in cuts, and you're seeing the ways that they're growing in that character. And you're hearing their cadence. You are now suddenly able to, when you sit down to write, you don't have like a vague sense of a Jennifer Aniston type. You have the actor who's cast in the role in your head as you're writing, and even that can be a powerful editing tool. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. And I will segue into a little story here, because there was one character on Pretty Little Liars. She's played by Ashley Benson. Her name is Hannah. And for the first couple of seasons, just based on my own particular experience, I perceived the character of Hannah in a really specific way. And I would constantly write humor for this character, and then be like heartbroken at the table read when the actress just did not get the jokes. Like, the jokes just never landed, And I would, a little bit in those first couple of years, like, in a way that I would not suggest for other writers, like, I would kind of dig my heels in on certain jokes where other people would be like, I don't know, I feel like this one on page 3, like, it needs a tweak. And I'd be like, no, it's going to be hilarious. And then we'd get to the table read, and it would just, like, she would open her mouth and a dead trout would fall out. So, but the thing is, it wasn't about her ability to deliver the comedy. It was that I wasn't hearing and listening and growing and figuring out where the actual humor of this character lived. And so I had to learn, along with the actress who was growing this character, where the humor lived for her performance, not for my perception of what the character was, but of the way she was inhabiting the character. And once I kind of figured that out, the way I wrote her jokes changed.
Yeah. And then they probably landed when you're like, okay, this is, I mean, like
they landed a lot better. They landed a lot better. And because I was then giving her stuff that she could, like, put on and, zip line through, as you said.
Let me ask you, Bryan, one of the things I think is so important as a writer, actor, creator is kind of like falling in love with words, like a love of words. What do you think, what kind of did that for you? Was it reading? I mean, I've always been a big reader. Was it, watching shows? What kind of, hearing words? What, I mean, I was never good at spelling, but I always loved words. And so I'm just curious, kind of that idea of the, love of words, what that kind of means to you, how it resonates with you.
Yeah, that's an essential, like, as long as I have memory, kind of thing. And I do have long memory. I'm blessed with an incredibly long, detailed memory. So there are things from childhood that I can recall that my mother was like, "That's not possible,"
Yeah.
like developmentally. And I'm like, "No, no, no." And then the green thing was over here, and then, so I think I attribute that. I typically attribute my love of language to a couple of things. I think that part of it comes from I come from a family of talkers and storytellers,
Mm.
very verbal people, who throughout my childhood, it was one that I experienced like kind of close community with multi-generational family that liked to get together in large groups and hang out and talk. And it was the kind of thing where every Sunday after mass, my great grandparents would kind of have the family over, and we'd have lunch, and I'd be playing with cousins upon cousins in the yard, and great aunts and uncles and aunts and uncles, and so there was just this large community of people talking all the time around me, which made me kind of like a very verbal person, and was sort of words were the first way that I learned how to like build relationships, if that makes any sense, through talking.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, like my best relationships are the ones where we like get into it and talk as like the
Yeah.
main thing we do. And then the second thing that I think for me was really specifically my mother. When I was a kid, my mother was an elementary school teacher. She taught mostly first and second grade. And so my mom read to me a lot. I read very early because of, because I think, there was a lot that she was doing at work that she was kind of coming home and practicing on me. And I remember a lot with books and projects, things with spoken instructions. My mom would test it out on me, the 4-year-old, before she took it to her second graders. It was just sort of like, if this little kid can like comprehend, then my
Yeah.
kid should be able to get it and complete the task. And so she was, I had a lot of tools because of that at my disposal to in order to indulge my love of language, that really helped me develop my relationship with words from a very, very early age.
I love that, Bryan, and I definitely see that you come from a family of storytellers. I feel that. I was also thinking, just for people that are, like, how do they find that, love of language? One of the things I was thinking about is you can read what people you like. And the reason I say that is, I heard an interview a long time ago with Wes Anderson, and he was talking about the New Yorker. And at the time, I'd never heard of the New Yorker. And I was like, well, he seems like a smart filmmaker. I like what he's doing. I like how specific it is. And I think he was talking about the film critic Pauline Kael, who I had never heard of. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to check out this New Yorker. I've had a subscription to the New Yorker on and off for many, many years. Now, when I read the New Yorker, I'm like, this is challenging. This is like chewy. There's words in here where I'm like, I got to get to my dictionary. But I really enjoy it, and I found a lot of value. And it's something that I was not exposed to. Maybe it was around, but it took me kind of being like, okay, I want to see what successful people or people I want to work with or people that I admire, what they're reading, what excites them, what interests them, and see if it sparks something in me. And I think that's just something that people can think about too, is like, if you don't know where to start, see what your favorite books are from people you really like, or things like that, and see, if that sparks something for you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then don't be afraid to explore. One thing that I did a lot as a kid, and part of it was just out of necessity. Again, I go back to my mother, as a single parent, raising 2 kids, and for big chunks of my childhood, especially when my mother was in law school, our most effective babysitter was the Denver Public Library. Because no, in part because the central branch of the library was a block away from her law school. And so it was most convenient for me after school to ride the bus downtown and spend the afternoon doing my homework at the library a block away until my mom was done with her classes. And then we'd go home. Especially if my mom had a night class, even, so I could be at the library fairly, into the evening if necessary, and be in a sort of a safe space. And so I because I already sort of had the seeds planted. Here was this big building full of books, and I was the kind of kid that I would be like, I would just wander and be like, that book looks interesting. What is it? I mean, never you mind that I'm like pulling, I remember once I pulled a book on, and this speaks a lot to like my entire resume of television writing in a lot of ways, but a book about notorious serial killers in England.
Wow.
And I was all of a fourth grader,
Oh my gosh.
poring over
Yeah.
the details of this murderer who used acid in barrels to decompose bodies.
Yeah.
And
Crazy, crazy. Fourth grader you, it's like, whoa.
but it's because John, you're telling a very specific story, in terms of, or you're talking very specifically about the experience of having someone recommend something to you, and that becomes your sort of first step into the forest through which you will traipse and explore. And that comes in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. And sometimes people don't come from places where they have the people around them who can sort of platform them in such a way.
Yep.
And so there's many, many ways to find it. And libraries are still our greatest resource in this country, I think. And I if anybody's listening and they're like, I don't have people who, sort of come from any kind of background that they can recommend stuff to me or help
Yep.
me curate, what will become my own sort of taste and predilection, that don't be afraid to go to your library and just like explore,
Well, I think that transitions us really nicely. I was just thinking about when you were saying that, like community and finding community, and I'm curious, Bryan, for you, with writing and the writing community, did you find I want to kind of fast forward a little bit, when were you writing a lot alone? Were you sending out, like, how did you kind of get like your foot in the door? Like, what did you find a community?
Mm.
How did you kind of um, work that, or find that, I guess?
Yeah. It's so funny because that's like a big long, again, it's a journey. But
Yes.
um I think if I were to scope it down, I think for me, um a lot of my community, especially my early days in Los Angeles, the early days of my career, um came out of college community,
Mm,
really and truly. I think I am one of those people for whom it holds very true that the most important thing you take away from college is the relationships that you build there. And so, socially in Los Angeles, as I was just kind of planting my feet and starting to grow roots and trying to figure out how to exist in the business of entertainment, a lot of my creative community was built on relationships that stemmed from college, people who had also moved to Los Angeles, people who were also in the business in some way, shape, or form, and maintaining social relationships, but also having found those people whose opinion and feedback and direction I trusted for counsel along the way, people who were willing to read drafts, people who gave notes that helped me get better at what I do. And that was a really important ingredient in my career. I think having that, I always say, if if half my classmates hadn't moved to Los Angeles at the same time, and it really was like I would say the first decade in Los Angeles, almost my entire world was just an extension of college because so many of us moved out here.
mm,
But it made it easy in a city that size, in an industry that can for some be that difficult to break into. And I say that really, really specifically too for myself as a person of color, because those barriers are even higher and wider, to kind of try and penetrate your way through. And there are many who don't have that in, and it can be an even harder way in. So I'm super grateful to have had that bit of privilege because of my education that allowed me sort of a way in through relationships, through community. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you always want to be a writer? Like when you moved out here, like were those relationships cultivated in that scope? You know?
Yeah, by the time I moved to Los Angeles, I was very clear about wanting to be a writer. I had sort of put down my any thought or ambition of being an actor actually at the end of high school, and college. Even though I performed a lot in college, still I was doing it as a hobby and as an extracurricular activity. And at a school like Northwestern, with its theater program, it was very clear, over the years, that my friends who were studying to become actors had a certain something that I did not have. I was able to do it enough to have a good time, get in a play, and then get to go to some awesome cast parties. They were people who have gone on to be in film and television and on Broadway. So, but but yes, I knew when I moved to Los Angeles that I wanted to pursue a career as a writer. I thought for a long time that film was the way that I wanted to go, but I was coming to LA at a certain place in time where, and I didn't even realize it, the independent films that had inspired me, and the independent directors of color who had inspired me, like that was just coming to an end by the time I got to Los Angeles. But the other thing that I didn't realize, excuse me, is that I am a little bit more built for a television writer's room than I am for a really sustainable career as a feature writer, just based on quirks of personality, if you will, and skill set. And I think my theater background, as a performer, actually makes me much better built for the way that television writing works.
Pretty much, Corbin. He's a personable, likable guy.
Yeah.
So being in that writer's room works, and then he needs his solitude, but he doesn't want to be solitude all the time. I feel like that's
in between the lines, I think.
But also because pitching is performing.
Yes, yeah. That's true too. That's true too.
Pitching is performing, and as you advance in your writer's career and you are on set more in your capacity as a producer, it's actually also, I think, for me, being able somewhat to speak the language of acting. Because I have enough experience so that when you're in those moments on set where an actor has a question and a director has a question and you need to try and figure out how to answer the question, it helps to be able, to the best of your ability, to give the answer in performer, not in writer.
Yeah, for sure.
Because those answers they sound different. And even recently, I've had an experience with an actor where I gave the answer as writer and then realized, like, oh, that is not what this actor is looking for in this moment. And then I had to go back and translate.
I remember I did a play once, Bryan, and it was about a family, and 5 of their kids had moved from Ireland to the US, and there was like 4 other brothers and sisters in Ireland, and the writer was a new writer. And the actors were like, what's going on with our 4, that are back in Ireland? Who are they? What's their story? And he was like, I don't know. We're like, wait a second. We have 4 brothers and sisters. He's like, yeah, they're just back in Ireland. We're like, okay, that's not satisfying the actor brain. We need to know our other family members, and like I said, he was inexperienced at the time. So it was like not a satisfying, it was a different answer, He's like, well, they're not in the play, so you don't need to know. We're like, well, no, we do want to know. Corbin, I want to talk to you about something today.
Ooh, what is it?
It's Anchor.
Ooh, have you heard of it? I have heard of it. It's pretty exciting.
We're actually using it right now.
That we are.
Yep. What does Anchor have, Corbin?
Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
Yes. And we are actually recording on our computers. We have not done it with our phone yet, though I'd like to try that at some point.
It sounds very easy. It's easy and totally free, which is the exciting part.
That is actually really nice that they don't charge you. I do know also when you're hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Makes it nice and easy. In fact, we looked at our numbers, and most of our listens are on iTunes right now.
Fancy.
And we have a listener in the Netherlands. Interesting.
I got a big Netherlands base.
Yeah. So everyone go out there, download the Anchor app if you're interested in starting a podcast. So you go to Anchor, or you can go to anchor.fm, ANCHOR.FM to get started. It's easy to sign up. We found it easy, didn't we, Corbin?
Yeah, super easy. Check it out.
And we're not that smart.
Yeah, so half of us isn't.
You can do it. Half of us. Which half?
Me, of course. I wouldn't throw you under like that.
Beep, beep. That's the boss. Just man me over with. All right, everybody, go check out Anchor if you're interested in starting a podcast. It's a great place to start.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
Bryan, I want to circle back. How is diversity impacting writers' rooms and the stories being told?
Oh, wow. I will try and ground my answer as much as possible in my own experience. I have been doing this as a job professionally since 2006. 2017, so a good 10 years into my career, was the first time that I was in a room, and at that point I was a co-executive producer, but that was the first time I was in a room where I wasn't the only person of color. And
but
only 4 years ago. It's not that long ago.
Not that long ago. Yeah. And now the room. Now I at the same time, I do count myself lucky in that before that, most of the rooms that I was in, at the very least, were diverse in terms of gender. And in terms of age and in terms of sexuality, but pretty often it was me and maybe one other person of color in a room of 7, 8, 9, 10 writers. I think that in terms of so that's a whole thing, because there's so many experiences that you have where I should say there have been moments that I have had where it has been challenging to do the work in the room, specifically when you're talking about characters of color that you're writing and you're the only voice that's sort of saying, hey, wait a minute. Everybody in this room has one opinion, but it's not necessarily connected to the lived experience that might inform the way that this character is being written. And can we take a look at that? That's not always easy to do, and it's especially not easy to do when, like me, for many of those experiences, I was a younger writer in the room. So I was at that point in my career where I was still sort of getting my land legs and didn't have a lot of experience under my belt. And that makes it challenging to sort of speak up sometimes, because even just your mindset, you're like, I just got here. Like, I just got here and I'm holding on for dear life. And is this the day that I'm gonna like implode my career, by standing up in this way? And so that can be a little daunting and a little challenging. And then also, I think in that time period that I'm talking about too, there were less opportunities to write characters of color. So there's also this strange and dissonant experience of you want to be able to bring yourself to the storytelling in television. That's what gives that's what gives any storytelling its weight. Even if you're not telling a story that is autobiographical, in a writer's room, very often people are sharing snippets of their own story as a point of access into character and motivation and backstory and all these other things. We are telling our own stories around the table to find a way to inform what is going on with the characters. And so there's also this thing that's missing when you're mostly writing for characters who are white. And now, because I'm a person who has spent a lot of time in majority white spaces, like I've done a lot of learning, and I'm bilingual in that sense. But then there's a little piece of me that's also always packed away on the side, and I've had to sort of take time outside of my work life to engage with that writing that is more deeply connected to who I am.
And have you seen it change? So go ahead. Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, you're asking the question that I was just turning the corner around to. Have I seen it change? I am seeing things change, and also the things that are changing in the writer's room, the things that are changing in terms of casting, and some of the stories that are being brought to the screen. I am seeing change, but those are still the places that are perhaps affecting perception, but not actually changing culture in terms of where the entertainment industry needs to do better around including more people from more backgrounds to tell more of their own stories. And so, part of what can sometimes be a little enervating is it's easy to greenlight a show with a majority Black cast, because then that puts quote unquote diversity in front of eyes. And for a lot of companies, that's the only work that they're willing to do to solve the problem, is like to put it on screen in a way that says, see, people who are not white people, look at all the work we've done. But they're not changing the culture of their company. They're not changing their hiring practices. They're not changing their leadership in meaningful ways that ensure that people who are making decisions, people who are fighting to get stories told on the executive side, that those spaces are also populated by a multitude of people from a multitude of backgrounds with a multitude of experiences that can affect not only the way shows are being cast, but can affect the kinds of stories that are being told, and actually the way that we are telling stories. Because there's even, I mean, if we're really going to get into it, there as a writer in this industry who has, when you spend a lot of time studying the way that Western and American storytelling lays out, those storytelling tropes even hold a lot of bias and a lot of thinking that reinforces, sort of a status quo that is cisgendered, heterosexual, and white, and that those are the only valid heroes and heroines and people about whom stories can be told, and that a lot of the time the diversity comes in the background, the secondary characters, and even I was watching something. I'm not going to say the title of it, in part because it's not coming to me in the moment, but where it was just so conspicuously, egregiously cast with, in every shot, let us put a silent person of color as background just over the shoulder of recognizable white male actor. And let's call it a day at that.
You're right. We did our job.
Well done.
Yeah. And it's like, there's more work to be done.
Yes.
Definitely. I really enjoyed, Brad. I don't know if you saw Watchmen on HBO. I thought that was really, I don't know if you saw it, but I thought it was really well done. And I saw an interview, make sure I say his name right, Damon Lindelof, who was kind of the and who's a white guy. And I think his staff was definitely, or his writing staff was very diverse. And the behind the scenes I saw was really interesting, because he said that he was opening it up in the writer's room to discussion. And he said it was really challenging because they were really pushing at him of like, here's what needs to be said. Here's what needs to be. And he was like, it was tough for him to like let go in a sense of, these certain things. And, at least in the interview, he said he did, because he's like, okay, he didn't quite understand is my point. He thought he did, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And he kind of needed it shoved in his face. And I thought that was really, interesting to hear. And I thought the show was really, really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to hear that kind of, behind the scenes, that kind of, it sounded like that tension or that fight, or that intensity that needs to happen, Bryan, for shifts to happen. Otherwise, it's kind of like someone just over the shoulder, like you're talking about. You know what I mean? If that's not happening. Yeah.
Everybody has their arm out, and then they're going like, "Wait, we're fighting for the same thing," and then there's
Yeah.
kind of that moment of that like intense standoff, which I think is important to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Bryan, because we went real deep there, which is great. Do you have any advice for people if they want to be a creative, a writer, actor, kind of like daily habits? Now, I know you've recently kind of moved outside of LA, still relatively close,
Yes.
So like how do you, either stay, I guess I have two thoughts. One is like on task, what you do, kind of do like if you set up a routine, and then also what you kind of do to recharge. So I think both those things, how you kind of stay in it and then how you get out of it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Staying in it is, and I'm a person who struggles with routine. So, but that's an important, I used to think that was a weakness. Um, when you work in TV for a long time and you realize that you are all on a wild train ride together. You're on a wild train ride together. I used to fight to sort of really order my life because I thought that's what it took to be a successful person. But I was working in a field with so much variance and unpredictability that my inability to maintain routine, I began to realize like parts of that are useful in terms of maintaining active flexibility. To be able to roll with the way that production throws curveball after curveball after curveball, and you've got to matrix it, you've got to neo it, or as I often say, you've got to, I use this analogy a lot too. You've got to sort of mimic soft set Jello, in that like it's just soft enough that like if you decide you don't want grapes in your Jello but you want strawberries instead, that you can pick out the things that you don't need and put in the things that you do, and then at the end of the day the Jello will still set just fine. But there's like a window where you can do that, right? And so maintaining that active flexibility is a big thing. I think kind of across the board for anybody in a creative career. There's unpredictability, there is instability, and getting good at maneuvering around that while kind of still holding some kind of thing, some kind of center, I think is super important.
Yeah, Bryan, I just read an article, and it's about a woman who's like tried to start all these routines in a sense during the pandemic, of like morning meditation, evening meditation, taking walks, hot yoga, cold yoga, spinning, like all these different things. And the part of the article is kind of just like letting go of some of that stuff, not feeling like you're failing because you don't have a routine that you need to like stick to and be up at 5 a.m. So I love that idea of like what did you say? Flexible. Whatever you said. Really
active flexibility.
Active flexibility. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So for me, that's really knowing when my best times of day are for what I want to accomplish. Typically mornings for me, early mornings for me, are all about ramping up and powering on. At best, I'm a daytime writer. So even when I'm not on a show, even if I'm just specking material or writing purely for pleasure, which right now that's the phase I'm in. I'm like writing ridiculous science fiction short stories just to just that's a vacation for me. So I try to reserve my good midday hours for that, and my evenings are about powering down. The writer's room specifically is a place that takes a certain amount of energy, and a certain kind of energy, and then you throw a pandemic and Zoom on top of it, and like It's a lot. So, so making sure that the evenings are really about consciously doing things that power me down,
Mm.
um, and taking care to do that so that I'm well rested and also well exercised, and also just sort of in the general sense balanced and healthy and whole. The other thing that I think is super important, and I think this applies for a lot of us in creative careers, because we hear a lot of no, and because we are often doing work that, um, though it is creative, it doesn't necessarily give us 100% creative satisfaction, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is finding that creative outlet outside of work that in a very simple way gives you real creative fruition from beginning to end. I set out to make or do, I make and do. I am able to put that before whatever the intended audience is, and I'm able to receive that satisfaction and that completion that I have carried this to the audience, and hopefully have, even if the audience is just yourself, have seen that satisfying result, that appreciation. So for me, strangely, that's kind of that's cooking. Is for me, it's not just about like getting my meals in daily, but it's that I can set out to make something, go through a creative process using ingredients and temperature and technique, and then at the end I have a dish that either for me is really satisfying, or for the people that I'm cooking for, I'm able to see a table full of my friends or family happily, you know, taking in nutrition that I have provided for them. And it's a little play that I've made just for me.
I want to dovetail with that a little when it comes to and you've kind of touched on it, but like with like writer's block or something like that, where it's like you cannot get further in that. How do you maintain that kind of creativity in such a fast-paced industry? If exactly as you're talking about, you want your morning, daytime writer, how do you keep moving through it if it's just you can't for that day? You know what I mean?
Well, yes, that's a one of the things I think is specifically in television writing, like your next feature writer guest can talk about what they're doing alone in the middle of act 2 of
Yeah.
their feature. But one of the things about sort of the process of a television writer's room is that by the time it is your turn as the writer to go off and sit down and put your draft on paper, so much of the heavy lifting has been done by the group, that you have like a really specific blueprint
Mm.
of what it is that you should be writing. And so hard it's hard to get lost along the way um unless you're in a situation where your room is maybe not functioning as well, or you're in a rush and you sort of didn't lay the groundwork as well. But it's hard to get lost.
Mm-hmm.
I found that in television writing, the only blockages I had, the only stumbles I had, came from maybe my lack of preparation versus true like writer's block. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel baked into me. Motivation wise, though,
Mm-hmm.
I may find that I'm off in script and I'm just having one of those days where my concentration is bad, or as all of us writers like to do, we are easily distracted by procrastination, and so it's like, oh, I do need to finish this act today, but I also see that laundry over there and that's more fun. um
Yeah.
so, but that's just about sort of like mindset, and so I find that often when I'm struggling in that way, it's the first thing that I do is change location. um the second thing that I might do is give in, and just say to myself, okay, consciously, I'm having a little trouble settling today. I'm seeing all these other things that are distracting me, so I'm going to do those things today, um and I'm going to do them all, and then I'm going to sit down and write, and the distractions will be gone, and I'll just have to acknowledge that this is going to be a late day, because I had trouble settling. But I don't, in the work of television writing, I don't find that writer's block is a thing that kind of fits, if that makes any sense.
The other thing I was thinking about when you asked that, Corbin, is I think there's a lot in, like, I will say, our business of writing, acting. I'm even thinking of like commercials that I've helped cast or have been in, where things are precious in the moment, right? Like it is work. It's people's livelihood. So we do want it. And precious, I just mean of like, I found for myself that I really started working as an actor and in casting when I really cared about each product in a sense, or each thing, or each job, or each role, even if it was like, okay, this is not like my ideal role, or this, like, I don't even know if I want to be slinging this thing, if that makes sense, for a commercial. But when I really started to treat it seriously and made it kind of maybe precious isn't the right word, but made it important in that moment. But also it's like, you're going to move on to the next thing. So you can't be like perfection, So it's like having this thing that and I guess what it makes me think about, Bryan, is like when you're talking about your process of like, well, I know I got to do some writing, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but I do need to care about it. I do need to spend time on it. It does drain me. I do spend energy. I think that's a very similar thing for other creatives, whether you're creating, YouTube videos or a podcast or things like that, where it's like, yeah, you make it the best you can in that moment, but you need to make it and then kind of move on to the next day. And I think that's sometimes where people, at least that I have, not interacted with, maybe I get it too, but like, it's not that it's a perfectionist, but it's just like, well, part of it is just like, you got to kind of keep working through it. You got to go on to the next day and you got to kind of do it. Otherwise you have nothing to kind of take a look at and see, this is good, this is bad, but you got to commit yourself to that when you're in it.
You do. And it's, you use the word precious there, and that struck a chord with me as well, because it reminded me that another thing that you need to do is, especially when we're doing this passion driven thing for our job, is to find and stay connected to the thing that is precious in it for us, and for me, very specifically, it's the zone. It's that moment where I am in deep conversation with the characters, and the words that are coming out of their mouths through my fingers and onto the keyboard, that feels almost, it's almost like when I'm in that zone, it's almost like an out of body experience. When I'm really in the zone, I lose track of time, and the world of the characters is almost more real to me than the surroundings that I'm in. And I enjoy that because, again, as a television writer, and talking about learning that moment when it's not yours anymore, that's the moment when the writing is the most mine, if that makes any sense. It's just me and the characters. And I know at some point I'm going to have to step back from that and be like, all right, this is what it is. And now there's a ton of people whose job it is to pop in and give feedback and contribute. But like, if I can try my best every time that I sit down and write to get into that space and enjoy it, and realize that, like, it's just this limited little window where I really do get to kind of have this out of body experience. And I'm always joyful about that. And so if you can stay connected to that thing that is precious to you about the process, whatever your process is, whatever type of creativity you are pursuing, especially when you're pursuing it for your means of employment, is find that thing that is centered in the joy of doing it,
Bryan,
and try and keep that at the center.
When I first moved out to LA and I really got into improv, I was taking classes at IO West, Improv Olympic West, which started in Chicago. And I remember I had like an 11:30 p.m. show with my buddy Michael Bellavia. It was a two-person show. There was no one in the audience but his boyfriend and the waiter. 11:30 p.m. And we had a pretty good show. And the reason I say that is we were in the zone you're talking about, where we're like, hey, this thing's cooking. We have no one barely in the audience in a sense, but we were loving doing it. And it was like, it was like in improv terms, it was a pretty good. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, of finding that where it's like, you know what I mean? There's no one there, but you're doing it and you're into it and you're treating it, with the respect it deserves. And, it is what it is. It is what it is, man.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Corbin, I was thinking we should go to best bad acting. What do you think about that?
I was thinking that too. I think it's the time that Brian's probably stressing the most out about.
Yes, Brian's like, wait, he's like, no. Okay, so Brian, this part of the show is very fun, more fun for us than you, but
sure.
So here's the thing: we're gonna send you some short lines in the chat from something. And you're going to enjoy this and just have fun with it. You can make it big. You can do an accent, whatever you want. We thought this would be fun for you, Brian. And we might give you a redirect, but the idea is don't try to be good. It doesn't have to be good. But, if you need to take your moment at the beginning to get your center, just it's to have fun. Okay.
Oh, boy.
This is a good one. This is a good one.
Boy. Okay, let me see if I can
focus it in.
I almost want to
do it.
Like I almost want to,
whatever you need to do it.
Well, no, it's not appropriate for this particular line given the material.
I already want you to get one of those hats. Like that's my first thing that I'm seeing in the background.
Yes.
If only I had a crown. But alas, no, it's not right. But I have something that's like right for like later in the movie.
Get it now, Brian. Brian, what is it? Get it now. Get it now. Do it.
No. Because I'm just gonna do it with just the sweater that's on.
Okay.
I'm just
perfect.
gonna.
Perfect.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest one of all?
Ooh!
Wow!
Ooh. So spicy.
There was kind of silence because I was like impressed.
Yeah, I was too. I was like, wow.
This is like usually we respond right away, but you kind of put us in a trance there, Brian.
I mean, maybe I shouldn't have left my acting days behind.
Maybe not. We're bringing it back. This could give you a gig. Corbin, you have a.
I do. I want you to imagine you're on one of those yachts near you, and you have a cognac, and you're just kind of enjoying the sunrise.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Okay. All right.
So good.
Magic mirror of them all on the wall. Who's the fairest one of all?
Oh my gosh. I saw some like Leonardo DiCaprio, Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, I did too. Yeah.
Okay, Brian. I got one more for you. I want
this.
This is going to be in your wheelhouse. This has got to be a musical. So see what you can do. This has got to be. There's something there, musicality wise.
It's early. I have not warmed up.
Wow. Already the excuses, Corbin.
Sun's in my eyes. It's windy.
Wow.
I know.
When actors come in and audition for Brian and they do this, Brian's like, Jesus, he rolls his eyes. But now that he's here, he's like all these things. All right.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest one of all?
So beautiful. Wow.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Brian, that was awesome. What a lovely voice you have.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Why, thank you.
That was really nice. Oh my gosh. Well, that was lovely. That was great. I think that was a perfect movie quote for Brian. So thank you for crushing that.
Thanks, guys.
Yes. So, Brian, we just want to say thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here, talking about all the different things we talked about. I loved, we hit a bunch of really interesting topics. And so thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge and joy with us. And next time we have you back, you'll cook something for us. How's that sound? And then we'll all be in person, right? Does that sound good, Corbin? We can try some of that. That would be cool to do. So
that sounds great.
We're remodeling my basement for a little studio, Bryan. So we'll have you over for that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
We're getting that set up. So, well, I just want to say thank you so much, Bryan. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. This was a lovely, lovely interview. So thanks again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Bryan.
Thank you for listening to the Moving Spotlight podcast. Please rate and review us on your podcast app of choice.
And we're on YouTube, so please check it out and like and subscribe, hit that bell, do all the things. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Helps others discover us. So Corbin, it's that time again. I have a one fun thing I want to share first, which is I saw this great thing where some young person was like, you know, if you ever want to start a conversation with like an older person that owns a house, just ask about their like remodeling, what they're doing on their house. And I was like, that's so true. Always working on this house, but my house is over 100 years old, working on the basement. And what's exciting about that is we just poured cement, and I didn't know this is this is my learning fact of the day. I'm watering the cement. I'm watering cement daily. Yeah.
Wait, like a little spritzer? Like, yeah, you're like spraying it? What?
Yeah, my buddy Jorge was like, well, you should, you know, he did this with his hand, like take it out of a bucket, and I got a little spritzer. And what it does is the cement, for people that care, like this is my interpretation, might not be perfect, but it's like if it hardens really quickly, then it can be more brittle and it's not as strong. And so if you let it harden slowly by watering it, then it strengthens it. And because my basement, the ceilings are low, it's a relatively thin layer of cement. So I've been down there every day and I'm just watering not a plant, but my cement. And hopefully it's super strong.
So I wonder who the first person to discover this was. Did they drop a glass of water?
No idea. Like, I have no idea. Hopefully we get comments that are like, yeah, you're not supposed to do that, or you are.
Yeah.
You're right, John, or you're wrong. I don't know. So I'm down there watering it. So yeah,
that's what you're doing.
That's my one fun thing. What about you, Corbin?
My one fun thing is for the holidays, my mom was wanting a Dutch oven like pot. And I just ordered it on Amazon this morning, and literally it said today it was going to arrive. And it just blew my mind, the world that we live in. That, I mean, it's probably, whether you like or don't like Amazon for the reasons that they are able to deliver it in a day, but it's still crazy. This like pretty heavy item is like being able to be shipped to me in a, like right in December, like right on time. It's so weird to me. And I was just floored by it. Was just today, really? Like, okay, cool.
I remember, like, you know, one of Bezos's quotes is like, if I can get people stuff within like a 2-3 hour window, he's like, I will dominate. Now he's already dominating, but like it is crazy that like, yeah, it's something, and that's kind of specific, if you know what I mean. It's not like something like bigger and more generic where, you know, it's like, oh, we've got that. It's like, that's kind of a specific thing to have that close to your mom to be able to get it to her.
I know. Yeah. It's insane. Like, I just asked her and got the idea and I just bought it. And it was just literally that quick. And like you said, if Bezos wants to get people something in 1 to 2 hour window, crazy. He probably can.
I will say, I think like some people might say like Uber, Lyft, taxi drivers are the worst drivers. I think Amazon delivery drivers are kind of the craziest that I've seen. I mean, let's be honest. This is from my own personal opinion. It's like,
what do you mean when they're actually driving? Like not even.
Well,
just
I just mean like
it?
they're stopping, they're checking where their next address is. Yeah. I just I see a lot of U-turns, a lot of
their hazards are always on.
The hazards are where they're on. Yeah, they're always. So.
That's amazing.
But no, that's awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Moving Spotlight podcast.